think to become a high velocity retailer in today's world, the emphasis has to be on things other than sales and inventory and all of these common metrics that everyone grows up believing that they have to achieve. There are measurements that never appear on an income statement, they don't appear on a balance sheet, but you see it in real life all of the time. You have to measure time and you have to measure empathy. I think right now with technology and with information overload, everything's commoditized. There's going to be a lot of discussion about commoditization of product, right? But it's really commoditization of people. If you think about it, right? Everyone's worried about becoming dehumanized and becoming zeros and ones. My prediction is that if you can focus on the uber human traits of empathy, of being flawed, not perfect, things that are idiosyncratic, that you can't have a computer generate, not quite yet. Those are the traits that I think that retail and consumer brands will have to focus on and accentuate. And clearly those are things you can't make up, just like in any person. If you come up with a different personality, people see right through it. So the more that you can focus on really being yourself, which is incredibly flawed, right? We all are. And if you believe that retail and brands are just a conglomeration of human beings, it means that that brand and retail company should be flawed and different. And that's real, right? And then you are vulnerable and you are compassionate. These are trends that are happening and you see them in leadership, and these are why these words are being seen in leadership magazines. But you need these in brands too. So once you have leadership that can embrace being flawed themselves and embrace being human with all of its imperfections, then you have to be able to translate that and transmit that and amplify the message, but in a really authentic way. And that's not just through paid search, and it's not just through retargeting, it's real human contact. And so if you think about it, how do you maximize humanity, the message, in as little time as possible with as most authenticity as possible? And I think to do that, it takes a combination of all of things. You have to be technologically savvy, but you have to be incredibly human savvy too. So I've come up with a new term. It's a James. It's IQ, and then people talk about EQ. I think in the next 10, 15 years, people will talk about TQ, which is really being technologically, the quotient, the tech quotient is humanly technologically savvy or technologically human savvy. Can you balance both? It's the old cliche that I forget about pebbles and ripples and things like this, but I know from my own experience, I always judge people and I judge myself. At my best, I judge my actions, not my words. And it's every action, every day. And it really does start with leadership. And having been in the private equity world and I've owned a lot of companies and managed a lot of people, I've been a high school teacher and a coach, and you can never replace the intangible qualities of a great leader. And a great leader doesn't get in front of a podium and make a grandiose speech and then proceed to act in every way counter to what they said. It's all of the little things, like the movie Up, the Pixar movie, when the dad, the little boy says to the older man and says, "I miss my dad for all the little things." So what I look for in great leaders are the things that they say without saying anything. It's the interactions they have with every single employee, vendor, partner, when no one's watching. And do they abuse power? Do they abuse their leverage? And I think a lot of the great qualities and great leaders throughout time, but particularly now, you will see a rise of not just servant leadership, but I think it's humble leadership. And those leaders will win, and they will touch each person, and it'll take time, right? And that's why it's really important for people to have a really long-term view about things. And we can go into that later about capital structure, and if you're allowed to do that. But I'm gonna judge my life over hopefully an 85, 90-year period. And just like with Ashley Stewart, I'll judge it for a 30, 40-year period. I'm just not interested in any short-term things. And so for someone like Walmart, they have to think 30 years. I think They can't underestimate the importance. I've met Doug before. He's a gentleman. He's a very decent man. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been having success. He's a humble guy, and he has to expect and surround himself with humble leaders. And those humble leaders have to recruit and retain humble leaders and people who win on merit. That's my belief. Well, I guess in terms of diversity, inclusion, and diverse skill sets, I guess in many ways I'm a walking poster for it. I guess in many ways, right? From a skill set and a person standpoint. From a skill set standpoint, I studied history and literature. I read a lot. I taught high school. I was JV football coach. I went to Harvard Law School. I thought I was going to be a public defender. I was an M&A banker. I've run a lot of money as a growth private equity general partner. I've run a distress fund. I've started my own private equity fund. And my style of investing is venture distress. And now I find myself full-time running a retail company. So that's my professional life. And so every single skill set and experience and person and friend that I've made over the last 48 years, right? They've come to bear to help transform Ashley Stewart. Now, from a person standpoint, I am New York born, first gen, son of Korean immigrants, middle child, grew up in a white neighborhood, married a white woman. My kids are some sort of something, and I don't care. I love them. I am in tall buildings in Boston, but I'm also in Southside Chicago working with African-American women, predominantly at Ashley Stewart. I teach at Duke University, and I am a volunteer in a myriad of organizations that advance the causes of undersupported constituencies. So I don't bring a different self as the CEO of Ashley Stewart. I bring my full self as the CEO of Ashley Stewart or the CEO of Firepine, my investment firm. I've always been curious about why people are different people at work or at home or with their friends. And it makes me sad that people don't have a culture at work, that they don't feel like they can be themselves, which never results in good. So I'm my full self all the time, like for good or for bad, right? And there's a lot of bad, right? A lot of flaws, and but there's some good too. And I think that what I've been very, good at is being very self-aware, not trying to be someone I'm not, and being vulnerable and asking for help. And I think good people, when they hear you do that, they actually embrace it. And so it attracts people who say, hey, I can fill in James's flaws and holes, right? I can complement what he's good at, and I can bring something too. And I guess I've always done that. And I don't think there's a need, I've never really felt the need to be like the boss. I don't really view it that way, right? It's more, the way I'm running Ashley Stewart is similar to how I've run private equity partnerships, in the sense that I'm just a partner. But yeah, maybe at times I'm the managing partner, right? Because there are certain times when you have to make the decision, right? And you have all the facts presented to you. And I'm not afraid to make those decisions, but I'd rather all my partners make the decisions. The only thing that I make the decision about is the most important things, which is really the ultimate culture and like vision for the business. And at Ashley Stewart, that's why I talk a lot about kindness and math. And those are two very transcendent things. And I know we're at the World Retail Congress. There's probably 50, 60 languages represented and 50, 60 nationalities. And I know from my travels, having lived abroad and traveled abroad, that kindness and math, they transcend every language, every culture, every gender, every race. And it's always right. And it's always obvious what the answer is. And I think that we as human beings and retailers, as again, conglomerations of human beings, they always try to overcomplicate what is so obvious, that people want to work in a kind environment and be treated kindly. And then you can lie all you want and manipulate accounting all you want and move your inventory all you want. At the end of the day, the math, it's very clear, right? You put in money, you get money back. How long does it take? It's that simple. So Ashley Stewart, for everyone's, to be clear about it, the reason why I got involved is that it is arguably, and I think not arguably, it is the largest and oldest fashion brand that was directed toward African-American women in this country, in the United States. And every metaphor you can think about served true. It was more difficult for that company to attract capital. It was more difficult for that company to get the voice that it needed in the upper echelons of retail and fashion. It was just, her voice was not heard. And it's also compounded things that it was sizes 12 and up. So you had a double whammy of both race and size, where this customer and this person, again, it's real life, right, was marginalized. So I got involved for that reason, because it just struck me to my core about how, frankly, unjust the treatment of the business was, and by extension of the customer. So that's why I got involved, and I didn't view it also as a diverse business. I think one of the reasons why we're having success in Ashley Stewart and some of the other things that I do, that I'm making an impact, it's sort of like the movie The Matrix, where you can take the red or the blue pill. I think retailers need to focus on the next 10 to 20, 30, 40 years, don't keep swallowing the red pill. I hope I'm getting this right. Take the other pill and understand that the world order is changing. It's just different. So everything that you learned and you thought was the rules of monopoly and that they were unchangeable, like written in concrete. If the events of the last 10 years, particularly with the financial crisis starting in 2007-8, have taught you anything, that these rules change. And then just look 80 years ago. I mean, we're at the World Retail Congress. Look what happened in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. It would be incredibly naive for people to think that that can't happen again, and that it's not. It happens every 80 to 90 years, and it's a leveraging cycle. So that's the pill that I took, where I looked at this business and this woman, and I said, I don't think she should be defined as plus. I don't think she should be defined as a minority, because that's always defining her as the other. I approach Ashley Stewart and as just being. It's just her. And it's hard to explain, but it's like kindness in math, in the sense that it's transcendent. It's a very empirical way of looking at things, where you're looking at first order definitions and not a second order definition. Like plus by definition means you're not something. Right? Minority means you're not something. And I think that what you're hearing in the dialogue about gender diversity, racial diversity, sexual diversity, I think some people have a hard time not defining things as another. I've lived my life, just because of my odd professional background and sort of my diverse way of living, I'm very comfortable with fluidity. It's just, I don't have to define something as in and this is out. It doesn't serve anyone well. As a human being, or frankly, as an investor, it's allowed me to make me and my investors ridiculously outsized gains over the last 2 decades, because I just see things maybe differently, and I value things differently too. I think what you're seeing in retail is just, again, retail is a conglomeration of people. And retail is also, the fascination with retail is that it's just a mirror about the way governments and people live. And the way governments and people are living is changing drastically right now. So clearly then retail, as if you believe that it's a mirror, it also has to change drastically. I think what you're seeing is that there is a general failure of government throughout the world, and that wealth disparity is failing a lot of very hardworking, decent people, and that private enterprise, good and for bad, is having to fill in shoes of what the government has provided its citizens in the past. And in an increasingly global world, you have increasingly global retailers. So global retailers are having to fill in the roles of multiple governments. And that's all you're seeing. It's not really about retail. It's about a macro socioeconomic change in the role of government in this country or in this world. So yeah, do I think that by necessity that certain private enterprises are going to have to do more things for its employees, not as employees, but almost as citizens? Yes. Do I think it's a coincidence that Google calls its headquarters a campus? No. I mean, words are incredibly important. These larger companies are building actual worlds, which is what we're doing at Ashley Stewart. I'm building an alternative universe. It's a different world where women who were marginalized in the past, I put them first. And they control voice, right? And they control decision-making. And it's run with kindness and math, and it's enhanced with technology. And I'm inviting a lot of people to come to play and say, why wouldn't you want to be in this world? And that's what's leading to the diversity in the opposite way of our world. There are a lot of white women who are entering our world and a lot of non-American people who say, I love this world. And you have Brazilian consulates saying, I love Ashley Stewart and I'm coming to Amsterdam, because all of a sudden European and Australian women are saying, I love Ashley Stewart and I am Ashley Stewart. And it's not excluding men either. We have a lot of men who are either gender fluid or dressed as women, and they like our clothes too, and terrific, right? So long as you understand the rules of our world, that you will treat people respectfully and be a decent person, and that you understand our mission, then come join our world. And if you don't, then don't. So when Chip Bergh is saying we have to be more socially responsible, I love it. It's a necessity too. And I think the companies that do it earnestly, and not just because it makes for a great PR snippet, will be successful. And particularly the Gen Z population these days, they see through things very clearly. And that's why you see a lot of articles about being authentic, about being transparent. And what I said at the big show 3 years ago. So I was on stage with Terry Lundgren and Greg Ferran, and Bill Brand was moderating. And Mindy had just gotten her first granddaughter, I believe. So Bill stepped in. And if you look at the YouTube clips of the NRF Big Show, it was in front of, there's the big auditorium. I said to everyone, they said, what's the most important thing that you think will make or break retail companies and people? And this was in January 2016. And I said, transparency. And I said that with transparency comes risk, because when you're transparent, it exposes everything. So really, maybe the better way I should have said it was two things. It's transparency and what is at your core as a person, and then as a company, what's your brand at its core? What is it? So anyone who asks me, I think my core is selling clothes or selling fragrance or selling cars. I'm like, that's not actually what the core is. What is it you stand for? The product is a manifestation of what you stand for. So Ashley Stewart, the product is form-fitting and confident and vivacious and fun. And really what it is, it's a manifestation of what what the core DNA of the brand is, which is self-esteem, right? Self-acceptance, fellowship. And of course the fashion has to fit that. If we were selling drab gray tunics, it would be counter to the DNA of the brand. And anytime this company has had problems in the last 20 years from a product standpoint, it's because people didn't understand what the true product of the company was, which had nothing to do about clothes. It's a mindset shift again, where I embrace just an alternative reality and a different new world order. You're taught in your whole life, again, whether as a person or as a retailer, you want to own a lot of things, and that these are assets. Those aren't assets. Like anytime you buy anything, you have to work for it now. Anything you own is a liability. And so the only asset in life that you really have is your education, it's your experience, and it's your reputation and your friends. that is truly the only asset that never diminishes. And so the way I look at consumer brands, forever, by the way, I've always sort of thought like this, those are the only things I really care about. The other things, the other assets, they're actually impediments because time changes so fast. Once you buy something, a house, land, a factory, you're stuck. So the inherent risk in owning something in a world where time is moving with really enhanced velocity, the risk of owning anything other than those 4 or 5 intangible assets I said is incredibly high. So the return standards that you need to be demanding from any asset investment, they have to be much higher, right? You're taking much more risk. So that's one mindset. So if you think about what that leads to, is that if you agree that those are the things that you want to own, right? Loyalty, passion, knowledge. So that means that the way that you should be structuring your company, you need to be long employees, training, right? Real relationships with, quote, customers, maybe not even thinking about customers, employees differently at all, right? It's just one world, except that certain of your people get paid and certain of your people don't. It's just they're in the same world. That's where you need to be devoting all of your resources to. And it's challenging, right? Those are very difficult things to define and to quantify. And so one of the things as an investor, which is where it has helped me, because I am mathematically inclined too, as much as I'm a big softie, I have defined over the last 20 years mathematical measurements to measure those intangible assets, where people often gloss over that. And that's the first place where I spend my time. So in the future, and what I'm trying to build at Ashley Stewart, and you asked me what my challenges were, you can imagine how difficult it was to recruit people to a company 5 years ago that was twice bankrupt, didn't have Wi-Fi or computers in its stores, and that was servicing a marginalized customer base. There weren't a lot of people who wanted to help. And one of the most satisfying things over the last 5 years has been the amount of talent and the type of people who want to join Ashley Stewart. They're great, and they're great on maybe the most important levels, which is why they want to do it. And so I'm investing in people, and I want to create an organization that's incredibly bright, well-informed. It really is helpful that I'm a lifelong teacher, and I want to create a nimble, smart organization that can adjust, shuck and jive very quickly. And I don't want to be dragged down by long-term assets that become liabilities very quickly. And I'm not playing the ego game. Like, there are things that people want to own in real life or in business life that they want to pound their chest and say, I own these things, and I guess I don't care. And that may be, contrarian, but I actually think it's made me a very successful investor and a pretty happy person, because I'm not working for a yacht. I'm working for my family and my employee base and my friends. And we'll see where the chips fall.